you don't actually have to listen to everything that your mind tells you. Almost all of humanity walks around in unconscious identification with conditioning, unconscious identification with thoughts, with emotions. And this is actually a state of sickness and delusion. It's not a state of clarity and well-being. This is called the ego, being identified with conditioning, right? And the ego develops in childhood because we don't really have any way of defending ourselves against our experience, and it basically forms in relation to fears and pains. And because we don't have any self-reflective abilities when we're very young, we just pick up the reflections of culture and parents, and all this stuff slowly becomes our sense of identity, becomes our sense of self. It's who we take ourselves to be over time, and this conditioning builds up a bunch of momentum, and it perpetuates itself into the future. So now you watching this video, you find yourself to be very identified with your thoughts, most likely, if you're a typical sort of average person. But this is a state of suffering, really. It's a subtle state of disassociation and disconnect. And the reason why I say it's a state of suffering is because it's a state of delusion. You can't actually experience freedom when you're stuck in delusion, when you're stuck in this lack of clarity, right? And the thing is that when you don't have any reference experiences, when all you've experienced yourself to be is just, a human who's identified with thoughts all day, right? You don't know anything outside of this paradigm because this is your whole life experience, right? But as someone who's done a lot of meditation retreats and meditation and self-inquiry for like 7 years, right, and all this spiritual, psychological work, it's blatantly obvious to me, right? It's just my everyday experience now that, unconscious ego identification is a form of sickness. In Zen Buddhism, certain Zen masters would literally refer to this mind identification as sickness, a mental illness, and they're actually completely right. And this state of identification is actually a very primitive state. It's not an advanced state. It's not an advanced stage of human development. It's something that develops in early childhood because we need to avoid certain pains and fears. And most people never grow past this. The ego has to construct itself in order to navigate life effectively, but then at one point in human development, it has to deconstruct itself in order to be well, in order to actually be healthy, in order to exist harmoniously within itself, with other people, and with the environment. So a lot of your actual thinking is also fueled by anxiety. It's fueled by tensions and repressed energies in the body, repressed emotions, and it's actually relatively neurotic. It's not sharp, it's not clear in a lot of cases. A lot of this is just fueled by emotions and things that your ego has repressed. And it doesn't really seem that way when you're kind of stuck in the illusion of it, when you don't have any other life experiences, when you don't do this psychological, spiritual work, when you don't do meditation retreats. You're just kind of paradigm locked in the ego. You're stuck. You're stuck there. You don't know anything outside of this bubble. It's kind of like Plato's cave and that whole analogy of Plato's cave, right? You don't know what's outside the cave. You have to go outside the cave. So your attachment to your thoughts and your attachment to the identification with them actually causes you a lot of suffering, whether you realize it or not. It causes you a lot of tension in the body because, like I said, it's actually a subtle state of disassociation. When you're unconsciously wrapped up in nothing but thought, and you find your entire sense of reality and self in thought, you're actually disconnected from actual experience because your thoughts aren't reality, they're your imagination. Right? You are not to be found in thought. Your identity is not to be found in thought. This is nothing but symbols, concept, fantasy, images. Right? If you believe that you are in your thoughts, you're taking yourself to be an object of your awareness. And this object of awareness comes and goes. Your thoughts come and go. They arise and they pass. They're temporary, but you always remain here. Your actual nature, who you really are, always remains present. You aren't something that comes and goes. The sensations in your body and the emotions come and go. The cells of your body come and go. Right? everything that you take yourself to be currently comes and goes. It's this pure consciousness that doesn't come and go. And this pure consciousness isn't separate from anything. It's not separate from a thought or a body or the person across the street or the tree behind me. Right? So it's this unconscious identification with conditioning that has developed in childhood in order to keep you alive. This is what creates the overwhelming majority of your suffering, 90 to 95%, even 99%. And I criticize a lot of psychotherapy. Right? I love psychotherapy. I have a major criticism of especially Western psychotherapy, because if the whole point is to heal people, but we're not deconstructing the ego, this is kind of left out of a lot of psychotherapy, right? If there's no real deep understanding of the nature of ego, right? How do we expect to heal people when the root of suffering is at the ego? It's at the identity, the false identity. Right? I love psychotherapy. There's just one criticism that I have of healing of any kind that doesn't involve the deconstruction of the ego, because it's missing the root. It's just bound to fail, right? Psychotherapy has a lot of good methods, and a lot of all sorts of healing techniques have great methods that provide a lot of value, but when they are not integrated with the deconstruction of the ego, this is a problem. So your identification with thoughts creates suffering. Your attachment to thoughts creates suffering and tension in the body. It's uncomfortable, it's disassociating, it's numbing. There's actually a numbness that occurs when you're locked in a state. And instead of really just being stuck in identification, you can actually just let go. You can just be aware of thoughts. You can be aware of your experience. You can apply mindful attention to your experience. You can actually practice meditation. This is really how to, act on what I'm saying in this video. Just practicing meditation every day, structuring in time for meditation so you can slowly break the identification with the ego. Right? Meditation retreats are also just exceptional. A lot of this stuff allows you to ground yourself in the body, to feel more vital and energized rather than repressed, denying parts of yourself, struggling against yourself, resisting experience. So the problem is that really we're not applying any attention to our experience. The reason why humanity isn't all enlightened, the reason why we're all ego identified, is because we don't apply any actual attention to our experience. We're so fucking unconscious and we don't even recognize it, and then we take our sort of delusions of reality to be what reality actually is. We take our mind's interpretation of reality to be what life is, to be what we are. And it's wrong. We basically become a prison to our own misconceptions about ourselves. Let me rephrase that. We get locked in a prison, right? Our mind's prison of the misconceptions that we have about ourselves, about life, about reality, about others. And it's this prison that we actually have to free ourselves from by becoming conscious, by being aware. That's it for this video. You can apply to work with me one-to-one. Link is in the pinned comment and the description. Take it easy.